Elizabeth Holmes could not help but pursue her route. She rejected the old way. And that's what makes people like this special. You want to encourage this. You don't want to imprison it. I think where Elizabeth Holmes went awry is that because she was an attractive female, she got too much attention. And I think ultimately that overexposed her, and it put her in the sight lines of a small-minded person like John Carreyrou, who thought very, very smartly that he could write a book that would make fun of this and succeed in the process. And I think shamefully she's in prison now because of the exposure she got. Isn't it interesting that the only person who made money off of this is John Carreyrou? Again, she's sitting in prison and she can't see her kids.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm honored to have on us with False Facts Fixed, John Tamny. He's the editor of Real Clear Markets, and he's real clear, and he's clearly really in front of me right now. So, John, tell us what's on top of mind.
Oh, yes. Well, thanks for having me on. It's really a treat to get to be on with an incredibly smart person like you. Yes, Real Clear Markets. My next book is ready to come out in June. It's titled "The Deficit Delusion: What Left, Right, and Supply Side Tell You About the National Debt is Wrong." I'm president of the Parkview Institute, which is where I do my thinking, and it's great to come on with someone like you and talk deep thoughts, including things about Elizabeth Holmes.
Right. What started me on reading, I mean, we all learn how to read, whatever. But when I was in elementary school, it was baseball books. I read one baseball bio after another. And somewhere in high school, I mean, a lot of that stopped because there was so much textbook reading. But then I really glommed onto Sherlock Holmes. And that was just like, mental candy for me. And I just started reading spontaneously, not assigned books. And I read the whole canon of Sherlock Holmes backwards not backwards. And here we have Elizabeth Holmes. So, I'm going to do a kind of an awkward case where, I mean, Sherlock Holmes hung out with his doctor friend. I don't know which one of us that is. That's probably me, Dr. Watson. And you can be Sherlock Holmes in this case for Elizabeth Holmes, who's now Liz, I guess. She's clearly kind of a shape-shifting character of sorts. And, she had a lot of pretense and pretensions and pretending. What's the pretension, the tension that went into this, and how does it differ from other kind of foundational companies as they are being created? The kind of fake it until you make it ethos is really big in the startup world. Where did Elizabeth Holmes fall awry? And is there any there to kind of, pretending otherwise than that she's a convicted felon?
I think where Elizabeth Holmes went awry is that because she was an attractive female, she got too much attention. And in getting too much attention, it ultimately got her. I don't think it's anything more than that. Every entrepreneur, and she is an entrepreneur, believes deeply in something that everyone else thinks is ridiculous, that everyone else thinks is impossible. And so when you have a book like Bad Blood calling into question her presumption that she could do what she wanted to do, and citing a Harvard doctor who says, oh, her idea was ridiculous. And oh, by the way, she's not even a doctor. Oh, please. That is why they're entrepreneurs. That's why when on the rare occasion their business concept succeeds, that it's worth $1 billion, tens of billions, and even more, the more valuable it is in the eyes of investors, the greater the achievement was, the greater the achievement against all odds. If Elizabeth Holmes had been saying, oh, I'm going to do something that's normal, I'm going to draw blood in the way they've always done, we would never have heard of her, because there's no purpose in that. She was looking to do something new. She got a ton of publicity in doing it, the female Steve Jobs. And I think ultimately that overexposed her, and it put her in the sight lines of a small-minded person like John Carreyrou, who thought very, very smartly that he could write a book that would make fun of this and succeed in the process. And I think shamefully she's in prison now because of the exposure she got.
Yeah, Derek Chauvin is in prison also. Um, he kind of caught up in a big bit of kerfuffle, whatever. Was a little bit more in the news, say, than Elizabeth Holmes. Maybe that's arguable. Um, Ben Shapiro's kind of working together the Derek Chauvin defense. I frankly am a bit of a defender of Derek Chauvin. I think he followed Minneapolis police procedure, and there was a guy who was combative and on apparently a near lethal dose of fentanyl circulating and whatnot, and from different angles. He like literally from different angles. The film footage shows different things. So kind of I put that out as an example that how you look at something can prejudice, in a sense, prejudge that event. And I kind of don't think he killed George Floyd. I mean, maybe it's manslaughter, maybe it's accidental death, maybe it's a situational thing. But different angles. This is the real key part. I mean, so how would you, in the role of prosecutor of Elizabeth Holmes, frame the case, just to kind of find out any biases we might have in looking at this thing? And I'd like to kind of put it through two different lenses. What's the guilty part of Elizabeth Holmes?
That's what I still can't figure out. Did sometimes the technology not work? Well, yeah, by definition, if it had worked, it wouldn't have been novel. And Carrie Rue kept pointing that out in the book. She kept saying, "Let's try this over. Let's do this again." Uh, I'm still not sure what she did wrong. It's not, and I reject the notion that she failed. But let's assume for a second that it's true she failed. That's certainly not an offense that puts you in prison. If she failed because, if we're going to go that route, that because what she wanted to do ultimately didn't live up to it, which again, I reject it. I'm not willing to say that. From being an angel investor, that's the business you're in. That's the business you've chosen. When you invest in a new business, you expect to lose everything. And you are, because you're looking for the impossible. You're not investing in a McDonald's. You're investing in something that has the temerity to say that we're going to make McDonald's irrelevant in the fast food space. Well, that's impossible. And since it's impossible, if it fails, it's not a story. Why was she brought to court, and why was she put in prison for allegedly being fraudulently telling something to shareholders? I mean, please, you're by definition going to lose money.
Well, I try to put everything through both lenses, and so I've been running this through my head since we spoke. Well, not every second of every day, but here and there. I've been putting this through my mental lens, to play devil's advocate and I guess angel's advocate. Um, and there were misrepresentations. They got her on wire fraud. It's kind of like the Al Capone thing. He shoots a bunch of people, whatever, but they get him on tax evasion. Wire fraud seems to be, first of all, there are no wires anymore. It's kind of an anachronistic title for the telegraph day. Or even telephones, landline telephones, but there's no real wires going on. Anyway, but it's wire fraud because she put the Pfizer logo on when she didn't have a deal with Pfizer and so forth. A lot of this is aspirational. I see that same slide through so many presentations. I'm a medical doctor, it says there, but I've kind of been for the last decade or so looking at startup companies, and I actually had a startup company myself. And we were at some point looking, we were almost going to be looking for investors. I had kind of about a year and a half, couple of year run with this company, and I hired somebody who was, I thought, brilliant and so forth. They were kind of interesting CEO deficiencies. He had strengths and deficiencies. He was really great in speaking in front of people, but the actual carry through, which rhymes with Carreyrou, of his tasks were sketchy. And the whole thing, we kind of lurched, whatever. We tried a few pivots, this and that, but to that point, my company, as well as many others I've invested in, start out with an idea, and that idea runs up against harsh reality, and then you pivot. Pivot can be partial or complete. I invested in a company that was going to kind of reshape the life insurance market, so you could buy something you actually needed rather than kind of buying this, one big thing or not. I'm not going to get into the details, but at the end of the day, he never did that. I mean, that's the thing that I invested in, and what he wound up doing is kind of being a kind of an ad conduit for insurance company, whatever, and that ultimately failed also. Whatever, tiny violins for people who lose money on this kind of thing. Nobody cares that I lost money. I went in eyes open. I knew I wasn't in the insurance business, but I was kind of in the hoping to make money business. It seems that maybe I should have known better. Who knows? But there's I think part of the problem, Elizabeth Holmes, is that I mean, it's not necessarily a problem. It could be a business model. She went for people who were not expert in the kind of stuff she was looking at. I mean, is that their fault or her fault? The General Mattis, George Schultz, and so forth crowd were guys who had made it in other spheres, not biotechnology. I'm just wondering, what's up with that? I mean, that's not really much of a question.
It's well, I don't think it's anyone's fault, but I think she understandably wanted prominent names. Can you blame her? Startups run out of money all the time. A board like that, investors like that, that's currency in the world we live in. It allows people to say, look at who's investing with me. Will you back me? Now, it ultimately came to be that she was so successful in bringing on a good board that she also had people lined up trying to invest with her. And it brings up something that I think is crucially important. There's a very liquid market for private company shares out in Silicon Valley. It's well known that at one point, Theranos was worth $9 billion in this. So Holmes's stake would have been worth, I think, $3 billion, $4 billion, something like that. She didn't ever sell any shares. Isn't that interesting? This person, this fraudulent person who, and I know you're not saying this, who might have gone to investors who wouldn't know any better, who weren't doctors like her. Why would she not have sold some of these shares if she thought her company was a lie? She didn't. I'm clear in what I wrote about her that I lived in the same apartment building as her parents. When Elizabeth would come out to visit with her lawyers in Washington, D.C., she wasn't staying in one of many houses that she'd purchased with highly valued Theranos shares. She was staying with her parents. This does not describe someone who is actively going out to defraud investors. I reject the
It's
notion.
an interesting point.
I find it insulting.
So being a Sherlock Holmes fan or Conan Doyle fan, also an MD, by the way, Conan Doyle, that is, there's Blazing, what is it called? Not Blazing Saddles, a Silver Blaze was one of his stories, and it had the dog that didn't bark in the night. Are you familiar with that concept?
No.
So Holmes, there's Inspector Lestrade, who shows up all the time, and he's kind of the well-meaning, kind of buffoonish constable, whatever, detective, and they're investigating some, murder in a country estate or whatever. And Holmes brings up the dog that didn't bark in the night, and it's like, what are you talking about? Well, there was, X, Y, and Z happened, and then there was no dog barking. It's like, what is that? So what? So well, that So anyway, the point is, it's the absence of something is evidence. So the dog, if it had been an unknown intruder, the dog would have barked. So the fact somebody broke into the house and the dog didn't bark was evidence in Holmes' mind that the dog knew the intruder. So it was somebody from the household, kind of like an Agatha Christie novel. It turns out that it's somebody, in that crowd, in the drawing room. And so, that what you point out there is kind of the dog that didn't bark in the night. it's evidentiary that she didn't do that. She was living at home. She was living modestly. It's an interesting point, that she didn't, kind of shake and bake and turn those things for any. I mean, that's a huge valuation. I mean, I don't know whether, I've seen, again, dozens, if not hundreds, of startup companies, one form or another, pitch their wares and whatnot. And it's really difficult for us to find the winners. If we could do that, first of all, there'd be no trick in it. Everyone would be wealthy all of a sudden, and we wouldn't have groups and try to crowdsource our knowledge and so forth. I mean, I invested in a company before I had heard of like this angel groups, and I had found somebody while I was doing my own startup, and I thought he was luminary and brilliant and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out there was not much there either. Um, and whatever, I lost my money, but I decided thereon to invest as part of a group, to kind of get the crowdsourced knowledge. I don't know if that happened with Schultz and Madison and whatnot, but there is the kind of the social contagion aspect, which I do find with investors. When we for whatever the product or pitch happens to be, when we hear that somebody else prominent has invested in it, that has a two-pronged effect. It kind of perks up our sensibilities and whatnot. And B, we think, well, at least, the very least, even if there's nothing, no there behind the idea, somebody thinks this, and there's going to be enough money to kind of do all these pivots that you need to do. The real problem with startup companies is that they run out of gas, they run out of financing, and so they might almost be there at the finish line. You see some poor guy, he's running the marathon, he gets to mile 25, and it's like, passes out and whatever. And you don't want that. You don't want to run the long race, be a good runner, and you just don't have enough juice to get. So pick him up, resuscitate him, get him over the line, whatever. You live to for another day. But here she is, and she basically got all the top people, and that kind of brings its own kind of social contagion aspect. And again, it's almost like she's a victim of her own success at it, or being at a time and a moment where people are looking for the female Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. Ask the question, and I would say this the same way. It's a different story, but I'd say it about SBF too, Sam Bankman-Fried. What if FTX had been worth 31 million instead of 31 billion? Would we have ever heard of him? Elizabeth Holmes is presently in prison. I mean, the very notion. She's in prison. She has to be at the DMV 24 hours a day, every day, because she was too successful in finding good people, prominent people to back her idea. And let's stress once again that when presented with the opportunity, because people were the most at this point, when it was worth 9 billion, you had the world's top VCs and firms trying to get in. She had the best investors in the world lined up trying to liquefy some of her ownership of the company because they wanted in so badly, and she didn't. Is this someone committing fraud? I submit to you, this is someone who believes incredibly deeply in what she's trying to do. But in doing this, let's be clear, she was getting more and more exposed on magazine covers, the female Steve Jobs and all this. It doesn't surprise me that once you hit a hiccup, or once Carreyrou essentially goes to the FDA and begs them, you've got to indict her, you've got to do this, that there wasn't a pushback, that there wasn't a backlash to it. But is this an imprisonable offense? I think not.
The Dunning-Kruger curve?
I've heard of it. What is it? I read about it just recently.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, I think it's a U-shaped thing. It's like the parts when you know nothing, and then you know so little that you don't do anything. And then there's the other part of the curve is when you know so much, you don't do anything because you know so much. It's kind of like, it's almost like falling in love. Like, if you don't know how to do anything, you can't fall in love. If you know so much about somebody, you can't fall in love. But in that middle part, you suspend disbelief, so that, I mean, the race wouldn't continue, but for like, wine and beer and whatnot, and a little bit of this Dunning-Kruger effect, so that we can suspend disbelief. You want it to happen. So I think the entrepreneurs are in that kind of love zone of the Dunning-Kruger effect, whatever, where you know so enough to want to be excited about, but you don't know too much to know that you would fail. You don't know so little that you would never even think of it in the first place.
Oh,
If I have that right.
absolutely. And I get so mad when people say, "Oh, I'm going to go to college to study to be an entrepreneur. I'm majoring in it." You don't. Entrepreneurialism is a state of mind. Who would be an entrepreneur? Yeah, I mean, I think about someone like Phil Knight of Nike. Oh my gosh, he spent 18 years making no money. It was a state of mind. He couldn't not do this. John Mackey couldn't not do Whole Foods. He saw something differently. What I would give to think like everyone else. I'd probably have more of my house paid for and a lot more money. I don't choose to be this way. I don't think you choose to be the way that you are. We are different. You're probably left handed. Most of us are. We are different in how we view the world, and we can't help it. Elizabeth Holmes could not help but pursue her route. She rejected the old way. And that's what makes people like this special. You want to encourage this, you don't want to imprison it.
It's interesting you point out the left handed versus right handed. I'm totally right handed, by the way, but metaphysically, I grew up in the Bronx, New York City, and grew up as a lefty, politically in a sense, and so I've switched over from one side to the other politically, but not, in terms of my dominant brain sphere. I just a day or two ago, I came across a picture of Jeff Bezos, and um, oh, because I was writing about baldness and about whether baldness actually is a positive or a negative in the marketplace. Like, disclaimer: I'm working at a kind of a med spa place. I'm doing the men's sexual health part, but one of my partners does like hair transplants for men, and they're much better than the Biden era, where they kind of plug and play, no pun intended. Um, but you know, but we have a lot of people want it, and I'm wondering. Well, I mean, they know they want it, and they're kind of in the early stage of the sexual value marketplace, and so they themselves feel that they will be better having the hair. Now, women don't care about appearance the way men care about women's appearance, but on the other hand, it has this iterative effect where if you as a guy think that women think this, or I'm going to do better in the job world, it's worth the say circa $10,000 investment or whatever it happens to be to do this. And while I was looking at it, it's like everyone puts, I kind of was searching for this stuff like this, like, oh, well, many bald men are successful. There's The Rock, there's Jeff Bezos, blah, 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 Mark Andreessen, whatever. Okay, fine. But that doesn't disprove the fact that, like the Larry David concept, it's like you feel kind of on edge about when you're going bald. And maybe someday you shave the head, you're like, oh, fine, I'm totally cool about this. I own it, whatever. And I think it's an interesting phenomenon in the culture. But while I was looking at this picture of Jeff Bezos, I was like, oh my God, he's got this incredible asymmetry of his face. Like, I don't know if you know this, but your dominant side is pretty much all this line of my left brain is artistic or whatever. All that stuff that came out is probably false. There's really just a dominant and submissive part. And so your dominant side, when facially in the Bezos picture, so I actually spent some time and I cut the picture in half and flipped it so you see both of the non-dominant side of his face. And I'll see if I can pull it up for you maybe now or later. But there's something else going on. Kind of he's right-handed, and his right side has kind of like a smirky look, like I'm kind of on this kind of thing. And his left side is much more, following along. And when I was looking at that, I was thinking, well, this is kind of the entrepreneur paradigm. It's like the one side is like, I'm thinking about something, I'm conniving, I'm working on the next step, and the other side is like, I'm into that. Like, I'm going to do this. It's almost like the guy and his dog. The dog's really excited. Like, what are we going to do today? What's going on? Throw a ball? Oh my God, that's great. But the other side is you, and you have to decide like, well, no, we can't do that just yet. I have to do this for whatever. So there's kind of this conniving part or manipulation or machination or whatever part. And the other part is like, yeah, totally, enthusiasm part. And I think you kind of need both these to marry in terms of a company. And for better or for worse, she, I think, incorporated like a reasonable icon of what people want in the angel world. And I'm not a full-fledged expert in this kind of thing, but I've gone to angel meetings monthly for almost a decade, and there is kind of a big impetus towards having her. somebody like her. We have special, meetings, like we isolate up 1 or 2 monthly meetings for like minority owners, minority CEOs, starting their companies, women own businesses, so forth. And this is clearly something that's, been codified in our DEI kind of phase, where we have to kind of, invest in this, equity part and get somebody else up and running. And I think, she represented that. I mean, I think, characterologically, I'm not sure. I don't know how to say this, whatever. I don't necessarily buy into all of her features, and I think she, had some aspect of, manipulation, whatever, withholding, and whatnot. I don't know where does, I mean, do you think there was kind of, unsavory manipulations on her part, and are any of those actionable?
Uh, I would say I hope so, or I presume. I don't see how you start a company that rejects what everyone else is doing unless you have manipulative qualities. Because you have to, it's not just that you have to believe deeply in what convention says is ridiculous. Let's keep, what do they say about the US? And I hate the number GDP. I just hate it. But they say that medical spending is 15% of GDP. So we're looking at a massive industry. And along comes Elizabeth Holmes saying that, well, I'm going to do something very differently. If her idea had been normal or at remotely mainstream, well, it would have already been taken by someone else. Yet she kept going precisely because the conventional wisdom said what she was doing was ridiculous. And that's what I think Carreyrou didn't get. He kept, well, I found this doctor who said this about her and that she, of course everyone rejected it. That's the point. You don't get, what's the efficient market theory that $20 line on the ground is picked up very quickly? Multi-billion dollar ideas aren't left lying around unless they're roundly rejected by everyone. And so to do that, you not only have to be maniacal in your belief, but you then have to convince people. She had thousands of employees. Carreyrou finds about 5 and says, "Oh, well, look at this. Oh, we found a criminal here or something." Of course, you had to convince them to go along with something that everyone thought was ridiculous, and that if you were a doctor or a typical MD, you might look at it and say, well, no, this doesn't make sense. Yet she had to get these people into her company. So I'm certain there's all sorts of manipulation. They said that Steve Jobs was that way. I hope so. You have to be different. You have to convince people to go in a direction that they would never otherwise go in. So yes, I don't think it's imprisonable.
Yeah, no, it's aspirational. I mean, speaking of Steve Jobs, 2007, he's like, this is what I want. I want this stuff. I want everything on an icon, on a screen, whatever. Before we had, the BlackBerry, that kind of stuff. We had phones. He's like, I want this. Now, that was not a thing. I'm pretty sure Tesla, the idea, the concept came along before the ability to do it. And it requires a lot of refinement. Um, but in our green room, I brought up, this is kind of an unsavory topic. Nobody likes to say the words Harvey Weinstein, but I think there's a Harvey Weinstein paradigm, which is that, as much as Harvey Weinstein, let's stipulate, is a bad, whatever man, the people who went to see him weren't going for Girl Scout cookies. They weren't there to, have him change political parties. They weren't. They were there because they wanted their careers to improve, and they knew and understand when they show up at the third floor of the Peninsula Hotel that they might see his peninsula, Florida dangling off the coast, whatever. And I mean, I think they would if they didn't think that. I'd be curious to know what, honestly, on a lie detector they did think, because I think, and mind you, he delivered one way or another, um, and the women who later complained, like like in Casablanca, shocked. I'm shocked to find out. I'm shocked to find out that I had a career boost. My career bulged because whatever. You get the idea. it seems to me that both parties, there's it literally takes two to tango. Tangoing by yourself looks a little bit like you're, delusional, or having a medication side effect or something like that. But when two people do it, it's like, oh, we are tangoing. So it takes two to tango, and it takes two to form contractual obligations. When we do the angel stuff, we are screened as accredited investors. Now, that doesn't accredit your mind or sensibilities. It accredits your bank account and your knowledge that these things are at risk and they are potentially at a loss. When you invest, $100 million of it, you have that $100 million spare to invest. Nobody's going to get $100 million off me for any company. Elizabeth Holmes, joined with Elon Musk at the hip, couldn't get $100 million off me because I don't have $100 million. And even if I had a tenth of that, I wouldn't have that much to isolate for that one task. So I would only do, maybe $10,000 or something like that, because that's something that marginally I can, like, I'll live without this. So it's like, when you put that money up, it's your, not quite chump change, but it is your money, of which, when people call it FU money, whatever, but that's the money you're willing to put to this test. And then if you don't have you do your due diligence along the way, well, what is there to say about it?
Mhm. No, absolutely. It's they have money to lose, and that speaks to why the rich are so important to progress. They uniquely have money to invest in ideas that much more often than not are going to fail. Uh, I view this as progress. No scientist ever brags to his friends or people he's trying to get to back him with, "Oh yeah, I just found out that something is true that you already knew was true." No, it's people trying to discover something else. And I want these people. I want lots of them. And I thrill at hearing that there are people with $100 million to isolate who will back them. We want many more of them. Uh, how dangerous then, if we're going to put the people who are skillful enough at attracting this kind of investment to try something new, that, well, if you fail in our eyes, I refuse to acknowledge that she failed. I think that's absurd. But if you fail in our eyes, you could face prison time. What a danger! How very un-American! What a dangerous thing.
So let's just isolate the Walgreens episode. Um, was there a bait and switch there, and is that criminal? She promised Walgreens that she was going to take, a nanotainer, whatever, some blood, and do X, Y, and Z with it, and whatnot. And then apparently she used somebody else's analyzers, and then her Edison may have been like the mechanical, the classic Mechanical Turk. I don't know if people know what that reference is. I mean, it's kind of an Amazon-ish kind of business lately, but the Mechanical Turk was, kind of a Swami in a box, dummy, early mid 20th century. And you put your coin in there, and it comes up with a prediction for you, whatever. But a lot of times there was somebody inside the Mechanical Turk doing it, like one of these great chess robots. It was just kind of a bunch of the magician boards, boxes underneath, and somebody could do the chess pieces by magnets underneath, whatever. So it's kind of like this legerdemain, chicanery aspect, which I think she did. What is that?
Okay, well, let's just assume the alleged absolute worst, that, oh yeah, the Edison was just basically a branding concept to use other equipment. Well, what does that tell you? First of all, it tells you, assuming that that's exactly what it was, which I reject, that tells you that she knew she wanted to get good results, quality results to those who used whatever it is, who were getting their blood tests. And so that kind of quiets all the nonsensical rantings from people saying, oh my gosh, people risk their lives on her machines. No, she actually was pursuing correct results. Uh, but I think that ignores a couple of things. What it could easily, and what I put in my review of Carreyrou's book, is that to the extent that she used other people's equipment, you could make the obvious argument that once again she wanted to get quality results to those who came to Theranos, but that she was also in trying to do this, she was acknowledging that the Edison wasn't perfect yet, so she was going to use something else until it was perfect. Okay, well that seems perfectly rational and good and happy. But then there's the other thing. What's got to be stressed about the Edison is that it was never meant to just be used as a standalone. It's kind of like Windows software. Windows software can be used in all sorts of computers. There's not a Microsoft computer that it's used in, although there is. It can be used in Dell. It can be used in Apple computers for that matter. The Edison was the technology that could be used with all sorts of other systems, and so it doesn't indict her that she was using some of their technology with others. But again, assuming the absolute worst, that it was all fake, she was still trying to get quality results to people, and I'm trying to figure out where the crime is.
Well, it's a funny thing, crime. Um, I remember Elizabeth Holmes forcing people to take an injection, otherwise lose their jobs. And I remember when she put out a formulation that had never been tried, and used technology which had never been, past phase one safety trials, never passed phase two and phase three, and mass produced that for billions of people around the world to take, at personal risk, but not disclosed. Oh, no, that was the government. That was government. So I have, what I call the Enron experiment. Probably you've thought of something like this, which is, tell me the stuff that Enron did that the government doesn't do on a regular basis for Social Security, for instance. Um, and you know, and it's in the sense Bernie Madoff. How much different is Social Security of a Ponzi scheme than what Bernie Madoff winds up doing? I mean, it's different. I'm not going to go too far down the road. I'm not a Bernie Madoff expert, but um, the fact of the matter is that the government does stuff when it wants to and it sees an imperative, and does some things that are far more heavy-handed and whatnot. Here, there's much a different model. There was no force feeding of people investing in her. There was no force feeding of people to buy her service and product. And one presumes Walgreen, according to my, you know, uh, a paradigm of adults engaging in adult behavior, would have the ability to do due diligence on her stuff, if anything. And in a sense, they wound up turbocharging the issue by signing a contract with her. I mean, once Walgreens signs, 128 million dollar contract with her, or something like that, that's going to open the gate for other companies to do the same. And does Walgreens, it's kind of like, I mean, we used Harvey Weinstein, but just a simple engagement of two humans, whether it's for love or lust or whatever. Adults enter the sphere of relations, with expectations, and again, kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect. We withhold our disbelief in order to have something happen, and is Walgreens at all kind of complicit for not having done its due diligence? Is Linda McMahon complicit for not putting $100 million and then crying about it later for not having adequate due diligence? General Mattis, George Shultz, were they used for their names? And whatever. It seems like everybody, if she had managed to Steve Jobs it out, and Apple had a lot more going on when Steve Jobs came up with this concept, which nobody had ever done before. If she had Apple behind her or something like that, if she were working within, Pfizer, whatever, you probably wouldn't hear about this. It would be something that would be either turn into something or be written off.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. It's a story because I think because of who she was. And I think it's unique in that way. Kind of, you and I came to know each other through the lockdowns. I think people will look back on them and say, wow, how is there this collective delusion? And I feel like there's something at work here. She had bad timing. My guess is, and again, I'm not willing to concede anything about how the technology was wrong or is flawed and all that. And even if I could, I wouldn't know enough about it to say it one way or the other. But I do feel like, What if Walgreens had signed the contract with her, which they were desperate to do? And can you blame her for wanting to do it? She had investors. She wanted to show them progress, all those things. What if it had been delayed by about a year? Would we be having a different discussion today because there would have been a slower process to get things where she wanted them to be? You're in startup phase. Suddenly, it along with CVS, the most important drugstore chains in the U.S., want your stuff in their stores. Kind of hard to then say, oh well, give us some time. You want to do that too. uh, can you blame her? Because every day in entrepreneurship can be your last. It's the Phil Knight thing all over again. He kept telling his wife every night, "Oh, everything's going to be okay," when he really thought Nike was going to die the next day. Elizabeth Holmes lived this could die anytime soon. Can you blame her? Can you blame everyone involved, including Walgreens, for wanting to get this out there as quickly as possible? People were intrigued; they wanted it.
It's an interesting point. You know, there was a point when, oh gosh, when was it? Probably early '90s when um, I had purchased a real estate property where my medical office was, and there had been kind of a downturn, 1989, maybe whatever, and things were touch and go there. I had some empty storefronts, and it's just I had to do a little juggling to make things work. I didn't take salary for a while, and it was tight to get my payroll paid and all that kind of tension, whatever. And I shared it with my wife. It's kind of we got through it. I mean, everything worked out. I knew it was always going to work out, but we have two sons, and at that point we were reproducing and producing whatever, and she told me later, like, she was hesitant about having any more children. We had one at the time, I think, because, or maybe there was two, whatever. I wanted a third, and we wound up not doing that because she had factored in the uncertainty. Now, in retrospect, I knew we were going to get out of this. And even if we weren't going to get out of it, whatever, I'd figure something else to do. It's not like life would end. And people have gone through much harder times, backwards, generationally than anything I had to deal with. But on the other hand, it was not really productive in a sense, in the true sense of having shared that. Now, I don't regret having done it because that's a marriage, and I think it's important to kind of get through things and talk things out. But people don't want to hear bad news, and they react in a certain way. Whatever. I think it's kind of the lifeblood and certainly the oratory of the entrepreneur in pursuit of money to keep things on the upbeat and accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, get rid of Mr. In Between. You don't want that. And so, we on the investor side are kind of used to hearing happy tunes. And the absence of those, getting back to my dog that didn't bark in the night, when we have an investment, we're not getting kind of a regular quarterly view of all things rosy, like, well, okay, something's going on. This thing's not working. But, I think in her case, yeah, I don't know. Things didn't wind up working out. But I have a question. I don't know. Maybe you're not the medical guy in this room, but um, what's the prospect of her idea taking flight at some point? You know,
This is where I'm going to defer to you. Occasionally I get emails from people. And again, speaking to my point about overexposure and how well known she came to be, when I wrote the 5,000 word essay defending Holmes, which was a rebuttal of Carreyrou's book, it's the most read piece I've ever written by far. I mean, people to this day email me and say, "Did you work for Theranos?" Because if you Google me, you'll see John Tamny Theranos frequently. And so I've subsequently had people come to me and say, "Well, see this vindicates what she was doing. See this development here, this vindicates what she was doing, that she was just ahead of her time, if anything." I'm not in the position to comment on that. And I would add, and this is what I would tell everyone, for me to say, well, see, she got it right, because I have pointed out that Fortress, the hedge fund, bought what she had, her intellectual property, for $100 million when all this went went south, well, that's a pretty big acknowledgement that she created something of value. But I'm not going to go that route anymore, and I'm not going to go that route anymore. Well, she's vindicated now. I'm going to go to the straight line. I don't want people imprisoned for coming up with ideas and trying and getting those ideas matched with capital. Uh, as you pointed out, as an angel investor, you're a big boy. People who could invest $100 million in a concept were big people. And they did that knowing full well they could lose every dime of it. We don't imprison people for things like this.
That's interesting. I like that. Um, are you going to have a book on this?
I want to, but it would probably have to be a book about a variety of these people. That why do we keep imprisoning them? Because I don't think it's just Elizabeth Holmes. I'm one of the few wackos out there who's defended Sam Bankman-Fried from day one. I just look at him as this guy. The notion that he was out to defraud people. Oh, come on. He's a left-handed other thousand times over thinker who came up with this crazy idea that I'm going to create an exchange. And he used to go to meetings with people just laughing at him. And then subsequently has the best VCs in the world lined up to invest with him. He's in prison now. And so for me, it's more of a philosophical thing. I don't want this is not what we do in the United States. I don't know if there's a book with Elizabeth Holmes. I'm sure there are good people out there who would want me to do it. I don't know if I could do it because I probably have enough to say, but I don't know. That's a good question. I never really thought about it.
So just a day or two ago, Bill Chisholm purchased the Boston Celtics for $6.1 billion. Now, 20 years ago, Grousbeck, Sr. and son, purchased the Celtics for $305 million. So 20 years, it went up 20x. Now, the last previous, I mean, the Washington Commanders sold for $6 billion. I don't know if that includes a stadium. This is no stadium. This is just the essence of Celtics. So they got the 18 banners, which might be the most. I think the Lakers have 17. But past, for the NBA, past performance is not an indicator of future success. The Oklahoma City Thunder, had been bad for a decade. The Detroit Pistons, for like 15 years. The Knicks, for like 15 years prior. Now they're all reasonably good teams. The Boston Celtics are at their height. He's buying it at its height. Those guys are going to get old, and then they're not going to have the same high draft picks, whatever, that you need to succeed, trade, whatever. And the concept that, day and age is not there anymore, to resuscitate one 2008, roster into the current one. So there's no indication they're not going to turn into, I don't know, whatever, the Charlotte, whatever they're called now, the Bobcats, the Hornets, whatever.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, but there's no indication that the Washington Commanders. I mean, that they'll probably have a good run, but I don't think the guy who bought it knew that Jaden Daniels was going to be good. That people buy these things. My point is they buy things aspirationally. And now is Bill Chisholm, and let's say I don't want them because I live in the area and I'd like the Celtics to succeed, but let's say they stop succeeding, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, and other teams are worth more than his, and his goes down in value. Is he criminal for having? Or are the people who sold it criminal for having made this interaction and investment and so forth? He's not. I mean, he spends that much on the company. Is he going to have enough money? He gives that much to the Grousbecks. Is he going to have enough money to pay, the next Jason Tatum contract or whatever? I don't know. It's not my problem. Not my business. Again, big boys. But what's being sold to him is, in a sense, Magic, not the Orlando Magic, but just regular old Magic. And he's buying his childhood dream. He's buying the sense of being courtside to watch the team. So forth. Is he a bad person for doing it? No, he's what we all want to be. We all want to be that. Mark Cuban was that. Now he's not that. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that we kind of live stories, and our DNA. We have DNA. What our real DNA societally is a bunch of stories. And when her story was positive, people want to be with her. And when her story somehow is soured, somebody pisses in her pool, as it were, then everyone wants to get out. Um, and there's kind of a big social contagion aspect for how we think. And I had um, um, Jacob James Rich from Reason magazine on yesterday, and uh, we were talking kind of about the way things can be faddish. A lot of things, a lot of science is not proven. Doctors used to like work based on their own perceptions. Now they're following guidelines. A lot of things are external, so we kind of get regimented into our thoughts. And I don't think it's either one. I don't think I'm not sure I would have invested in Elizabeth Holmes at the time, um, because I'm kind of a skeptical guy, start to finish. But people did. Are they wrong for having done so? There are companies that have been through that. I don't like the politics behind the founder. I don't like the concept. I don't think the thing's really good. But other people do. Am I angry at them for investing it? No, I don't really. I don't care. you know. And so some of the things companies that I don't like have succeeded. Some of the ones that I do like haven't succeeded. And conversely, it's just kind of a random, S show that these things happen, and it's all part of the flux. I think the part that you really get at is that it's kind of like flux. You need enough matches striking to get a fire started. Even if you watch this little video about literally how to start a fire, it's a lot of work. Just we take it for granted. We have a match, and it's an incredible invention. Boom, you strike a match, or you have a little whatever. We think fire is just like nothing. But out in the woods, get one of those TV shows where you go all nature, naked and afraid or whatever. It's going to be like possibly a week-long episode, if at all, for you to light a fire. But the person who did that, we don't even think of that person. But there's some aspects of it for Theranos where there's going to be, that's going to be all part and parcel of the medical thing, because, technically you could do that. You can find these things on a micro enough basis. I don't think you necessarily run into like the Heisenberg principle. It's hard to like photograph atoms because they're so small that you perturb them by photographing them. That's kind of, getting down to atomic principles. But for a lot of the things she's looking at, proteins and peptides and whatnot, it's not, you don't have the same rate limiting step because it's, thousands of atoms, whatever put together. So, theoretically you can do this at some point. The question is, whether she overstated and what was her timeline.
I love how you put it. I love how it's the things we take for granted what we have. We don't focus enough on what it took to get there. And so I love the people trying to get us somewhere we haven't been yet. But too often those in media, and it's left and right, those in government are constrained by the known. They can't imagine that there's something beyond this. And so when something fails, they feel like, well, and again, I refuse to use fail. When something doesn't go exactly as planned, they go after this. I find it, I like how you point out how this was other people investing in this, in putting substantial amounts of money. It brings to mind my thing about CEO pay. Well, if you're not a shareholder, it's none of your business what they're paying CEOs. And so it just strikes me as odd. The disdain, the unhappiness with Elizabeth Holmes that came from people who 99.999999 had no investment in this, probably never had any interaction with Theranos products one way or the other, yet they want her in prison. Ah, boy, that burns me up. What's wrong with these people? And I saw the same thing with Sam Bankman-Fried. Oh, well, I would have known not to invest in him. Yeah, I mean, cargo shorts and everything. Have you seen the guy? Oh, yeah, well, see, I wish you'd come to all of us before. Isn't hindsight so brilliant that, again, no one with any money up front, they're publishing all sorts of op-eds saying, well, this is how you know not to invest with certain people. Oh, yeah, so it was, I think, 105 VCs, including Sequoia, the best in the world. They saw something in SBF, but all you nobodies who don't have any money at work can now criticize them for investing with SBF. It just infuriates me. It's just small-minded nonsense from people who should just keep their mouths shut.
No, we have a lot of survivor bias, and it's easy post hoc, propter hoc, that you can see something as having succeeded. It's like it's all obvious, and then you see the failure is all obvious. I I'm not maybe I'm slightly a gambling man, but generally not. Um, but the people have divergent. You may, fortunately, we're both sitting down. People have divergent opinions about whether we should or anybody should spend further billions of dollars in Ukraine. Okay, now you can make the argument either way. If we don't do this, X, Y, is going to happen. We have to do this because it's promoting NATO democracy and the American way, Superman, whatever. Um, if we continue doing this, millions of lives senselessly lost. It's the Great War all over again. It's not so great. Definitely war. Anyway, blah blah blah. We can go on and on and on. But nobody had, the Danish proverb. Amongst all the things difficult to predict, the future is the hardest. It's nobody has an answer for this. But so if we saw this as a financial proposition, one way or another, and we have to either buy Ukraine or not buy Ukraine, it's difficult. Now, some people will put their money where their mouth is and so forth. And, if Ukraine went on the stock market as a proposition, whatever, you could invest in it. And it has a kind of a political aspect of that. But I don't think there's a right answer, because so many other things are going to be at play no matter what happens. It's not a unitary decision. It's kind of like Tolstoy's War and Peace. You think you make a decision, but so many other things ripple out and happen secondarily that might have effects. It could be the weather when you go to battle. It could be some guy slip in the mud. Somebody, your general loses an eye. You just don't know till it happens. And a lot of this, I think in the Tolstoyan analogy, the generals go to war and we think it's only them. It's other stuff that's happening. And then we afterwards, we have kind of this remorse. We have buyer's remorse. You got like I bet there are a lot of Germans who are like, that mustache guy, maybe he wasn't the right investment. Maybe he wasn't the right leader for us. Mistakes were made. Um, but at the time, there was enthusiasm. At the time, whatever. So everyone's always brilliant in the retrospectoscope, as we say in medicine. Looking backwards in time to see how pointless they were in making their decisions. But clearly we make a lot of pointless decisions right this minute. I'm kind of not in the transgender camp, but a fair amount of medicine is. Again, getting to this kind of like herd mentality, and a lot of doctors are working on guidelines. This is kind of the essence of my talk yesterday with Reason author. But people have the social contagion aspect. So I grew up knowing that you shouldn't cut off a teenager's genitals of either sex, but now that's not what people think. I grew up when sobriety from narcotics was pointful. Now nobody thinks that. Now, what happened? Did humans change? Did their genome change? Or did we just like make a decision? And is that decision the right one? I think it's very debatable. And you know, your concept of this, kind of aligns a little bit with. I mean, you were kind enough to repost my Purdue article, not the
Thank you
college,
for that.
not the college, but the company, and they were the toast of the town. They came with this ADF, this abuse deterrent formulation, um, and it was unique, and frankly it's used now. Suboxone uses that patent. Since Suboxone is the principal, narcotic conduit for treatment, for better for worse, currently, but it's on the shoulders of Purdue Pharma's OxyContin. And when they made that ADF, nobody was abusing OxyContin. When people, for whatever reason, wanted to do drugs, they steered away from that. Was the one they didn't buy. And this is very not just anecdotal, but it's factual. And frankly, they were the good boy in the class. They were the star pupil, but they were the wealthiest pupil in the class. And when it turns out things were happening in the classroom that were unsavory from maybe some other students or from the teacher, whatever, various whatever, like who got punished? Well, the one with the money got punished because that's the one with the money, and that's the one they could recoup. Um, it's not the same story as this, but we have remorse, and then we do human things. We go after, as a mob, to assuage our lack of recognition of our own complicity.
Hmm. Great point. I think you're so right. I think you've hit on how what was just a normal aspect of business became something entirely different. And what a shame. Again, isn't it interesting that the only person who made money off of this is John Carreyrou? Um, so here we sit, And then Elizabeth Holmes, who loved herself and loved progress enough to do what most people wouldn't do, drop out of college to try something new. Again, she's sitting in prison and she can't see her kids. It just, who, forget about the judges, all you people out there who just are convinced she was wrong, that you read this book, that to read Carreyrou's book is to page after page say, oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. I mean, is the easiest book to rebut I've ever read. But to make yourself feel better because, to your point, you fell for it, you fell for the initial hype, you want her in prison? Look in the mirror. There's something wrong with this
Yeah.
in so many ways.
Yeah. Lavrenti Beria, the Stalin's KGB guy, said, find me the man and I'll show you the crime. I think all of us would not be able to sleep if we had our own personal, agent in investigating all of our dealings. I mean, I shouldn't say this on the air, but I have literally gone through yellow lights that are turning red. I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know if I'm going to come after me for that or not. Anyway, but for one way or another, throughout a lifetime, there's stuff that we all do, and when it comes under scrutiny, and then kind of like off with their head, it turns a little bit like Through the Looking Glass. The Red Queen goes after Alice, um, you know, and why? Because she can. Who knows? So we're kind of rounding out our hour here. Any final crystalline thoughts from John Tamny?
My final thoughts would always be that progress is born of people trying things, of interesting people, people unsatisfied with the status quo being matched with capital. By definition, by that very description, there's going to be a lot of outcomes that aren't necessarily grand, or at the very least, not what we expect. Uh, but this is what makes the United States the United States. We descend from people who crossed oceans to get here. We're an entrepreneurial concept. Believe me when I state the obvious, that people who crossed oceans long ago to get here were ridiculed by the people they were leaving behind and told they were doing a very dumb thing. But that's what makes us what we are. Let's stop the witch hunts. Let's stop imprisoning people for having succeeded in getting the chance to try something new. What a dangerous path we're on if we keep doing this. And I fear Elizabeth Holmes isn't the last one. Again, I think we're seeing it with we're seeing it with SBF.
No, I agree, and we see it even with people who do well. Elon Musk
Yes.
does well in everything he does, and he's vilified, and they
Yep.
would love to find something. They've been looking. Donald Trump. I don't know if you've heard of that guy. They look when you have a bunch of Lavrenti Bereas at your disposal, nationwide, statewide, citywide, and so forth. You can, do it. You can cause untold damage. Lawfare is essentially the rule of the land. I'm not saying she was picked out for the same political reasons, but people what is it? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Well, I think maybe the same is true for prominent investors, and it's understandable, but kind of that's what you bought in for. Some of our great stories. I wrote this Zika book, and towards the end, I was thinking, like, how would you adjudicate science? How would you adjudicate whether I'm right about Zika being real virus but not causing microcephaly? And 8, 10 years later, it hasn't. Well, there's no court in science. You have public opinion, and frankly, most people don't care. There's they. I was thinking at the time I was writing, that people would have much better opinions formed on Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. Like they would be able to tell you, or the previous generation about OJ, whatever. They can tell you luridly and in complete detail the ups and downs and who did what and so forth when it's prominent divorce case, because that's kind of what we care about. We care about these stories and whatnot. So the stories kind of overcome and subsume, in a sense, the underlying facts of the case, and that's what happened to Derek Chauvin. or Chauvin, or however you pronounce it, that we get a mob mentality, and it's not our best feature.
Hmm. Yep. Yes, 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 yes. I
All right.
think we see this very similarly.
Well, thank you so much, John, for being on. I'm very much in debt for your time. You're not going to get a check, though. Maybe I'll invest in your next book, but we'll leave that aside.
Founder shares in one of your angel investments.